commitment to pragmatic public policy. Wendy has worked in and around Lansing's political circles for over 2 decades and has her pulse on key business issues before the Michigan legislature. Before joining the chamber, Wendy held several policy-related positions in the Michigan House and Senate. In addition to being named one of Lansing's most effective membership organizations or association lobbyists many years running, most recently again in 2023. Wendy was recognized in Crane's 2022 50 Names to Know in Lobbying. Please join me in welcoming Wendy Brock.
Okay, so thank you to all the chambers for the invitation to be here today. I'm going to spend my time talking specifically about the new Earned Sick Time Act. I might call it ESTA today. My friend Justin Winslow from the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association is going to focus on the minimum wage issue, and then we're going to come together kind of for a Q&A session around both issues. But as we get into this today, if you have questions as I go along, feel free to interrupt me. Just say like, hey, can you clarify that point? Not sure. I guess maybe raise a hand. Who has heard about these new minimum wage and paid sick leave changes that are coming in February? Okay, so that's good. How many of you feel like on the earned sick time piece that you like fully know what you're going to do and understand your compliance obligations? Okay, so like 2, right? And that's pretty common. Like, you shouldn't feel bad about that. This is a really complex law. It's full of lots of nitty-gritty details that are going to affect your business. Even if you don't think it's going to, it will. And we'll get into that as we go. But maybe just really quick about the Michigan Chamber. So we're a statewide business organization. The chambers are organized kind of in a federation style, where I think of it kind of like an umbrella, where you've got the U.S. Chamber at the top, you've got your state chambers kind of in mid-umbrella, and your local and regional chambers kind of below. And we kind of work cooperatively with each other, but we all have our independent boards of directors, we all have our own missions and our own things that we are important to our members, but we try to work together where we can, and we like to be a strong advocate and just a helpful resource to our chamber network, and specifically to our friends in the local and regional chamber world. So let's just maybe level set this conversation. So how did we get here, right? How do we have these 2 new sweeping laws, crazy laws, some would put it, that will go into effect in February? Well, it really has to do with ballot proposals. And let me help you understand how this came to be. So going back to 2018, there were 2 ballot proposals that were being circulated to go on the 2018 ballot. So when you go to the farmer's market or somebody says, hey, will you sign your name on this petition, we want to put this issue on the ballot. In this case, you had one on minimum wage, one on earned sick time, and proponents of these 2 issues gained sufficient signatures to qualify for the November 2018 ballot. Now, when that happens, when an issue qualifies for the ballot, the Constitution, Michigan's Constitution, gives the legislature a few different options. It says that the legislature can do nothing, or they can vote to reject it. And that means that that issue goes to the ballot and can get approved or disapproved by the voters. It also contemplates the idea that the legislature can adopt it, okay? And when the legislature adopts, the Constitution says that the legislature can subsequently amend that language with a simple majority vote. Unlike if it goes to the people and is adopted, it requires a supermajority vote. So think like the 2 marijuana ballot proposals, right? They've had some implementation issues. They've been really hard for the legislature to kind of wrangle and to figure out what to do with, because it requires that supermajority vote. A lot of people have to agree on policy, and that doesn't happen a lot in politics, right? So in this situation, the legislature decided to adopt, but they said, not so fast, we're going to adopt, but we want to make some changes to make it more workable for businesses and workers alike. And so they did that. They adopted these 2 ballot proposals in September of 2018, and then they subsequently amended them with that simple majority vote in December of 2018 before they went into effect in early 2019. And this is really kind of where we kind of start to get into it. So these alternative language went into effect in early 2019. But that question about whether the legislature had the right to not only adopt but to amend has been challenged in the courts ever since. And so in July of this year, we finally got a decision out of the Michigan Supreme Court that said, not so fast, legislature. Under the Michigan Constitution, you had the right to adopt and amend, but you did not have the right to amend until a subsequent legislative session, meaning they couldn't have amended again until 2019. Now, I'll pause there to say, we fundamentally disagree with the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. If you pulled out your pocket Constitution today, you would not see language that supports the conclusion of the Michigan Supreme Court. We believe that there are something called plenary powers, that basically the legislature has the right to do something unless the Constitution says that it doesn't. But nevertheless, we have reached the end of the road on appeals on this, and so now we will have this new minimum wage law and Earned Sick Time Act going into effect on February. And let me just pause by saying, now we're going to start to get into some of the details. And I want to remind you that I'm here today to give you that 30,000 foot view on these things, but nothing I say today should be construed as legal advice. There's a lot of other details we don't have time to cover today that you're going to need to dig in on, and I just don't want you to leave here being like, oh, I now know everything I need to know about this, and I am going to march off and implement it. You need to dig in further. Okay, so here's what you need to know about the so-called Earned Sick Time Act, or ESTA. So effective February 21 of 2025, this will go into effect. And it impacts every single employer, anyone who employs a worker. So if you have one or more employees, the Earned Sick Time Act applies to you. There are no exemptions. And there's no exemptions for businesses. And we're not even just talking about traditional businesses. We're talking about nonprofits and local units of government. You're talking, anyone who employs anyone, right? So wrap your head around that. And it applies to all employees, right? So it applies to full-time employees, part-time employees, seasonal employees. It applies to temporary employees. And in fact, the definition of employee under the Act, as written, is so broad that we believe it isn't even intending to cover independent contractors. Okay, so no exemptions. If you are a small business, meaning that you have 9 or less employees, you can divide up the time between paid time off and unpaid time, but that is the only difference for small businesses. You must comply with this act. So how time accrues, it says effective February 21, all employees are entitled to accrue 1 hour of earned sick time for every 30 hours worked. Okay, 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, not every 40 hours worked. And you're thinking, well, most of my employees work 40 hours. Why is it 30? I can't tell you, don't shoot the messenger kind of thing here. Okay, and an employee is entitled to use 72 hours in a given year. Now, time does not stop accruing when that employee reaches that 72 hours, but you can cap usage at 72 hours in a given year. Now, here's where the small business piece comes in. So that 72 hours can be divided up. First 40 hours is paid. The 32 hours, the next 32 hours can be unpaid. But that is the only difference, again, for small businesses. So 40 hours paid, 32 hours unpaid. And a lot of you are probably thinking, well, I don't offer one sick time bank, or I offer one PTO bank, one paid time off bank that combines vacation time with sick time with other personal leave, right? What about that? Can I do that? If I do that, if I offer more than 72 hours today, am I in compliance with this act? And what I would say to that answer is, not so fast. Probably not. It will probably force you to rethink how you handle paid time off going into the future, or beginning on February 21. And let me help you understand why. It's because the act says, yes, you can offer one PTO bank to your employees, and that would, so long as it covers 72 hours and it accrues at the same rate or better, right, you would be in compliance. But it also says that if you do that, all of that time, it might be 3 weeks of time, it might be 4, 5, 6 weeks of time, has to be provided under the same terms and conditions as is stipulated under the Earned Sick Time Act. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because of the other things. So it talks about notification, advance notice, right? So if somebody's going to take vacation time, you might say, I want 2 weeks advance notice. I maybe want to be able to deny it, or I'm not going to allow you to take, the day before Christmas off. We need to have full staffing, whatnot. This says, no, if that time off is foreseeable, you may require the employee to give you up to 7 days advance notice. But if that time off is not foreseeable, not a defined term, then the employee only has to give you notice as soon as practicable. What does that mean? Again, we don't know. It's very situational dependent. You'll have to make your best judgment about whether that time off was foreseeable or not. So again, if you want to have that one PTO bank, now all of those 3, 4, whatever weeks of vacation, all of that time must be in this kind of same advance notice kind of fluffy world. Another big issue is increments of time. So the time off under the Earned Sick Time Act or that one PTO bank, if you're combining, has to be used in the smallest of increments that you use to track for payroll. For some of you, that might be 1 minute increments. For some of you, it might be 6 minute increments. Maybe it's 15 minute increments. Usually not much higher if you're tracking hourly employees. And so when you give that 72 hours, that employee then can slice and dice up those 72 hours into 1, 6, or 15 minute increments, depending on how you track for payroll. Again, a big problem if we're talking about 3, 4, 5 weeks of vacation, being able to be sliced and diced up like that, and just the administrative challenges associated with that. Furthermore, on the use of time, the Earned Sick Time Act specifies that the employee can use the time off for their own personal, mental, or physical well-being. Could be a routine doctor's appointment. They can also use that time to go to a child's school for something related to the child's health or mental health, domestic violence, sexual assault, not really anything anybody would quibble at. The bigger issue is that they can not only use that time for themselves, but for somebody, an immediate family member, someone who's related by blood, or anyone that they deem to be equivalent to a family member, that their affinity is deemed to be an equivalent. So it might be my neighbor Susie, it might be my high school girlfriend Joan, it might be whoever, and basically have to take that at face value that they're using that time for that. In terms of carryover, the time says, okay, if you don't use your 72 hours in a given year, that you can carry over any unused time from year to year. Again, they can accrue more than those 72 hours. That time must carry over in perpetuity.
Perpetuity.
You got it. And so even though you can cap usage at 72 hours in a given year, that time must just continue to carry over. So it's available on paper, but maybe not actually available to the employee. It's just kind of administratively cumbersome. We don't really understand, again, why that is that way. In terms of documentation, a lot of employers will require documentation. You may are doing it to comply with the Federal Family Medical Leave Act. You might do it because you suspect abuse. This says, yes, you can allow for documentation, but only after 3 consecutive days off can you require that. So really it's on that 4th day. And then if you do that, the employer bears all responsibility for paying all out-of-pocket costs associated with getting that documentation. So there's big questions about what does that mean? What do you actually have to pay for? Do I just have to pay for that sheet of paper? Or do I have to pay for the entire visit? And what if I don't provide health insurance to my employees? Do I have to pay for the entire cost of the visit out of pocket if they go to the emergency room when they could have gone to the primary care physician? We believe so. We don't have clarification on that question, but that will be a consideration. We also believe that mileage will need to be paid for by the employer. And so there's a lot of details here, right? Some of the big issues in terms of implementation really relate to these last 2 points. Is that this is not anything to just kind of like keep going on your merry way and not worry about the penalties or worry about the consequences on the back end if you don't get this right. So first of all, the Act says that an employer shall not take retaliatory personnel action or discriminated against an employee because the employee has exercised a right protected under this Act. essentially meaning that the minute someone takes earned sick time under this act, if you take any disciplinary action against that employee, there are rebuttable presumptions in this act that assume that the employer is retaliating against that employee. The employee, once they exercise their right to earn sick time, almost becomes untouchable from an HR perspective under this language. This should be a huge concern to all of you, and again, creates a big reason why a lot of employers are saying we are moving away from having one PTO bank. We know our employees like this. They like the flexibility attached with it, but there are too many risks and too many downsides of keeping everything in one PTO bank and are likely to separate unless something is changed by the legislature. And further compounded by the fact that penalties, if someone believes that they have been harmed, they've been told no about taking time off when they are sick or time is needed, that the employee not only can go to the state to file a complaint, and the state can file a civil lawsuit and they can levy fines, but it also allows an employee who believes they've been aggrieved to go straight to court, to find themselves a personal injury attorney and to file a lawsuit directly against that employer on their own as their first option. So it is a liability nightmare from an employer perspective. And so you might be listening to this and thinking that this is feels high rhetoric, right? I promise you, if you read this act, you will walk away with these same conclusions. This is not high rhetoric, this is just the facts about the situation that we're in with the aggressiveness of this language. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's talk real quick about just what are we doing, right? So you heard at the beginning, I'm this big bad lobbyist, right? And but this is where this comes in helpful because we at the Michigan Chamber, with our friends of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association and a broad coalition of business groups in Lansing, have been working to help legislators understand that it isn't as much about the 72 hours and all of that. Like, we're okay with that for the most part, right? It's not ideal, but employers can do that, right? But it's all of these other details where employers' hands are tied behind their backs and they're being told, no, this is the only way to do this. That is what we are taking, what we are saying needs to change, right? Some of these details that just really don't work in the real world. A lot of people read this, especially if you have an HR hat and you say, who wrote this? This doesn't make any sense. And we agree, this doesn't make sense as written. It needs to be written in a more practical and flexible way that reflects different workplaces. And I'll give you a couple examples. So in the home healthcare industry, the kind of motto of the industry is no call, no show, no job, right? Like, if you don't show up for your job and you don't call to let anybody know, you're not going to have a job for very long, because in that industry, they're dealing with life or death situations. My mom or my grandma, she needs her medication, right? And she needs her medication for her own well-being. And in that industry, they can't go to this fluffy no call, no show, no problem, right? Approach. And that industry needs different language to allow them to continue to serve patients. Same thing goes with staffing in hospitals or 911 centers or in sheriff's departments across our state, right? So it's that sort of thing. So we've been meeting with legislators to help them understand that this one-size-fits-all approach isn't workable and it needs to change. You need to give more discretion to employers in the real world, and you need to understand that you are pushing employers to make decisions about one PTO bank, which again, employees really like and want. You're pushing them to re-separate those things. And so this could actually end up hurting the very workers intending to help by reducing their flexibility and kind of making employers forcing them to make changes that employees don't want. The political realities here, though, are tough, right? So there are only 8 session days between now and the end of this legislative term. We're coming to the end of the 2023-2024 legislative session. We are in an uphill battle to get these legislative changes through. The labor unions, which were partially involved with getting these proposals off the ground, are basically saying to legislators, do nothing, this isn't a big deal. Businesses will be fine, employees will be fine. They're saying now, like, they're gonna make this a lifetime scorecard issue. So this is very much an uphill battle on these issues, but we do believe that there is still an opportunity to get it done. On earned sick time, we're talking about wanting 5 key changes. There's more than these 5, but these are the 5 big ones. The first is, if you have a plan today that meets or exceeds that 72-hour threshold, you are already a good actor. Why do you need to change anything else, right? We're saying exempt those plans, for those employers that are doing something that equals to or is more generous than what is mandated under the Earned Sick Time Act. The second would be to exempt certain businesses and certain workers. So small businesses, they need an exemption. Small businesses, from a staffing perspective, are least equipped to be able to deal with this. There is a federal family medical leave law that sets that threshold at 50. We believe that's a good starting place. And then furthermore, to exempt certain workers like part-time workers and seasonal workers and independent contractors, to clarify those things. To require time to be used, we've actually kind of evolved on this to 1 hour increments. I mean, it seems like at the very least we could get to 1 hour increments, an agreement around that, and to allow employers to require advance notice. Again, it needs to be situational for different employers. They maybe need different things, but certainly in advance of a shift seems like a reasonable alternative, especially if someone isn't otherwise incapacitated. To eliminate the right to go right to court and these rebuttable presumptions, assuming that the employer is guilty before you've even gotten started. And then finally, to allow employers, this is very pro-employee, to front load time at the start of a year. So you get to determine what a year is under the law today. Like, it might be a calendar year, it might be a benefit year, it might be an anniversary year, but you get to decide what that is. But instead of having to work to accrue your time, the employer could say, here's all 72 hours or whatever that number is for you above that. You can use it as you see fit, but we're just gonna give it all to you up front. And then if you choose that provision under the act, we're gonna incentivize you to do it by not requiring you to carry over time, because time would always be available to an employee in a given benefit year. So I think there's universal agreement around that one, that makes sense. So this is a list of our coalition partners. We have, I think, like close to 80 different groups at this point that have been advocating with us for changes with the legislature. Uh-oh.
Can I help you?
Is that the last one? It maybe this, no, I don't think so. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna end with this. And this is a big one. You wouldn't think it would be, but there are still a lot of legislators out there who are kind of pleading I'm not hearing from anybody about this. What are you talking about? This isn't a big deal. Representative Boland's not one of them. But we need your help to help lawmakers understand the problems that exist with not only the Earned Sick Time law, but with the minimum wage changes, to help them understand why this is problematic for your business, why it's problematic for your employees. We need more storytelling on this. So quick ways to get engaged. There's a tool on these websites that you can type in your address, either your business address or your home address, and you can figure out who your state rep is, who your state senator is. We've developed talking points from you, and if you don't want to call somebody on the phone or go to their office hours, I always love those touch points. But if you just want to do something quick, simple, easy, we have ready-made emails that can be sent. Just kind of click on a website and we can share these slides. And basically you just enter some quick information about yourself and you hit send. The email's already been typed for you. You can edit it if you want, but if you just are like, I want to be done with it, that is a quick and easy way to engage. And we would appreciate your help on that. So finally, if you are looking to wrap your head around your compliance obligations as it relates to earned sick time, we have a compliance toolkit on our website. There is a little bit here on minimum wage as well. We've got a good side-by-side of what is required under current law versus what's required under the Earned Sick Time Act, an FAQ sheet, which is now like 9 pages long. That is really helpful in terms of digging into some of the compliance resources, a list of lawyers and some other things. We are also doing live Q&A webinars that we had one this morning actually, and they've been greatly attended. I think people are finding them to be really helpful. So lots of great resources I would encourage you to check out. Becky, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you for all the work on getting the coalition together.
100%.
Just a note on that.
Probably have.
We've been sharing
Yeah.
those links since July, and I think the other chambers have too. And then additionally, on top of it, as a chamber alliance, we did send in letters to our representatives to voice concerns around
Appreciate that.
this.
Yeah. And so that is it. I know I probably made your heads spin. But I'm happy to answer any, well, maybe we want to move to Justin and then we do questions together.
Perfect. Thank
Okay.
you, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. That was amazing. Great presentation. Thank you for being here today. I am introducing Justin Winslow. He is the president and CEO of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. So, according to his LinkedIn, he has been there for 13 years and 6 months. He has been also the vice president of public affairs, many other amazing jobs. He's a graduate of Michigan State University, BA and MPA, and he has just been in this field forever. He's just our go-to in the hospitality and tourism industry for any information that we need to know. He's a resource. His team is amazing. They have a very comprehensive website. If you're not a member and you want more information about that, you can check out his restaurant, Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association website. But he's phenomenal. He leads this industry organization that advocates for the state's $28 billion hospitality industry with over 650,000 workers. They're a strong voice in the sector, and he focuses on workforce development, public policy, ensuring its industry's growth and resilience in Michigan. He can even tell you even more about himself if you would like to. Justin, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I have no slides. Clearly I provided no background on me, so thank you for accessing the LinkedIn. Are there any restaurateurs or hoteliers in the crowd at all today? Just to give you a sense of how deep, yeah, not a one. Let me try to give the briefest of summaries of the issue on the minimum wage tip credit side. We always rely on the Michigan Chamber to lead on general business issues. They are the 800-pound gorilla in the room every single time. We are happy to collaborate and work with them anytime. There are sometimes industry-specific issues where it requires someone who is focused specifically on our industry. When it comes to the tip credit, that's where we come in. It's something we've been doing as there have been attacks. Michigan has been, for some reason, and I don't exactly know why, the focal point of a group called One Fair Wage to try to eliminate what's called the tip minimum wage in Michigan, going all the way back to 2014. We were the first state in the country that they tried to do this on back then. We survived in 2014 through some strategic moves, and 2018 similarly, and then we dealt with a very onerous legal system, and we will not go backwards. We need to look forward, because there are 80 days until February 21st when this court ruling takes effect. There are, as Wendy said, 8 session days to try to get a fix to what otherwise will be a dramatic change to the minimum wage, and even more dramatic to the tip minimum wage for the restaurant industry. So right now we are at $10.33 an hour, on pace to about $12 an hour by 2030. And the tip credit, the tip minimum wage, Michigan is one of 43 states that allows tipped employees to be paid a lower cash wage as long as tips at a bare minimum make up the difference to get you to the minimum wage. What we know is that on average servers in Michigan are making about $30 an hour, and that number is jumping quickly thanks to rapid inflation over the last few years. So we know that they are doing well, but it's a lot of education to educate people. You know, sure, we're one of 43 states, but people hear terms like sub-minimum wage. That doesn't seem fair. It takes a long time to try to explain that issue and why a tip minimum wage is so effective for the restaurant industry. So, to bring it back, without change to the law, on February 21st, we will see $10.33 an hour go to $12.50 an hour, and the tip minimum wage jump from 38% of the full wage to 48%. And then by 2030, that lower separate wage will slowly take up to there is no difference between the two wages. And that might sound like, well, that doesn't sound like that bad of an idea, or maybe that's not that big of a deal. It is catastrophic to how full service restaurants operate, not just in Michigan, but elsewhere. And there's a lot of empirical data, not just sentiment in the industry, but data of why it's a disaster for the industry. And so our goal, and what you see in House Bill 6056, which is introduced and looks great as it's introduced, increases minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2029. That's about on pace with where the court ruling has the minimum wage going to, but distinctly different. It does not phase out the tip minimum wage at all. It keeps that wage at 38% of the full wage. That means that wage is still going to go up. Every single year that full minimum wage goes up, the tip minimum wage is going to go up. It will stay at a 38% of the full wage proportion. And that is introduced in a bipartisan way, which is something we're very important on. It is very important for us to share. Introduced by a Democrat from Macomb County, Nate Shannon, and then co-sponsored by a Republican, Graham Filler, out of the Mid-Michigan area. And we know from hosting 22 roundtables across the state with 700 restaurant servers and about 65 legislators who attended these, there's overwhelming support for this concept. Overwhelming support in a bipartisan way. In fact, we like to say, if this bill could just be put up for a vote in the near future, like tomorrow would be great, we think it would get 80 to 85 votes of 110 in the House and about 26, 27 out of 38 in the Senate. They're very challenging politics of who's going to get what in a very limited amount of time in lame duck that complicate things and make this harder. But on its face, on its value, we know it is popular, and because when you share some of the data, when you share that this is supposed to be helping restaurant servers, this is supposed to be creating a more equitable pay for them and get rid of the quote sub-minimum wage, it's shocking then to learn that 83% of Michigan servers don't want to see the change. They love the system the way it works right now. They know they're making $30 an hour with a very flexible schedule, and that is what legislators heard around the state at these 22 roundtables. And in all honesty, not orchestrated, but tears at almost every single one of these, usually from the single mom who's, let's say, 28, who relies on this industry to provide them a flexible schedule so they can be at home when they need to be with their children, while still making a great income, making $75,000, $80,000 a year, while having that flexibility is why it works for them. And they made made their point very loudly, very clearly to legislators of why this was necessary. We know that it's going to decimate the actual operators of this industry. First and foremost, we always like to put the fact that if you think you're helping workers, you're not. It's not what they want. This system works very well for them, and it's why 43 out of 50 states operate with it. But it's going to decimate the operators, which means their job will be at risk itself. We think 50 to 60,000 restaurant jobs will be lost based on understanding what our industry members are telling us they're going to do, because 1 in 5 restaurants, full-service restaurants, will close entirely. That's over 1,000 restaurants. More likely your smaller independent restaurants, the ones you love, the ones that are like your favorite independent community restaurant that's there for all the T-ball games, that's there and an active part of your community, those are the ones that are most at risk to shut down completely. So we know it's devastating to the industry. We know the workers don't want it. We know it's not working in the very few places it is. Chicago, just in July of this year, implemented its first phase out of the tip credit. This was a city-specific initiative. It passed. The very liberal mayor of Chicago made it a point to pass this legislation. They did. On July 1st of this year, Chicago just phased out they didn't eliminate it, but they phased out the tip credit. That means the tip minimum wage went up for the first step up, and 6,000 jobs were lost in this industry within a month. We know in DC, 2,500 jobs have already been lost in this industry, and it's not coming back. Restaurants are moving out to the suburbs in Washington, D.C. Servers are making less. That's the irony of all ironies, that servers are making less now than they were with a lower tipped. There's the Senate minority leader. See, he wants to talk about this issue. I'll call him back. Though he would probably love to talk to all of you right now, frankly. But the point stands that it's not working in the couple areas, not statewide, but these 2 regional areas that it's been implemented recently. Dramatic job loss and no improvement by servers. Servers there are furious because they're making less money if they're still employed. And the restaurants are not doing well either in those situations. So it's not working. And then this went to the voters. This went to the voters in November in Massachusetts, maybe one of the bluest states that exist, Massachusetts. And you would think if anywhere a ballot initiative to straight up eliminate the tip minimum wage would sell really well there. It went down 2-1. 2-1. Because when people hear this for more than 4 seconds, when they have a chance to absorb the facts and understand this issue, they want the situation that exists right now. They know that a tip credit helps that restaurant operator, especially the small independent. They know that servers have a flexible work schedule and a lot of good income that they're getting right now, and they know that it gets worse, not better, without it. So this is what we spend a lot of our time trying to educate the legislature on. I'm at least as worried, if not more worried than Wendy, that there just is not a lot of collaboration and communication going on with 8 days to go. It makes me a little nervous, because as I said, we are 80 days out before February 21st, when the implementation of the ESTA goes into effect, and the first iteration of the tip minimum wage takes effect. We know there's going to be job loss. We know there's no going back once those jobs are lost. So we have a very short amount of time to take action. For those that are interested, SaveMIRestaurants.com is a way for you as an operator or anyone in the general public to weigh in. So far, we have sent 16,000 letters. Has anyone been to a restaurant where you saw a table tent on the table by chance? Because we've had those spread out across the state. 16,000 letters have come into the legislators and the governor from the general public. About 3,000 letters have come in from servers. If you know restaurant servers or you own a restaurant and want to engage your team, SaveMITips.com is where restaurant servers can go. They are very active and engaged on their own front. Some of them were in Lansing making their case known to legislators today. And next week, December 10th, we're expecting somewhere between 500 to 700 restaurant servers and operators rallying at the Capitol to make this point clear. We know the industry is behind it. We know the general public's behind it. We know it doesn't work by transitioning to lose a tip credit. You got to break through the noise and lame duck, and it's pretty hard right now to do that, but that's what we're expecting. So anyone who knows anyone that wants to sign up to be there next week, whether you're an operator, heck, we'll take anyone from the general public that wants to be there next week at this point. Big numbers coming, though, to the state capitol next week at 10 a.m. December 10th. So if it's on your calendar, if it's not on your calendar, make the time available. We would appreciate it. And I know we're going long, so I'll just be here to answer any questions you have for Wendy or I.
Thank you, Justin. Oh, we're gonna go into some Q&A,
Oh, yes, sir.
and we have a question.
So my question, well, more for Wendy because I'm not in the restaurant business, but do you or does anybody have sample language for a small business that just wants to comply exactly with what is written?
Not at this point. So we have had several requests for that. We're still trying to find a willing legal partner who will put that together for us, because obviously, that's how they make some income, is helping businesses comply. And the other thing is, we are still very hopeful that the legislature will make some changes between now and February. And so, kind of believing that that could still happen. But it's on our list. We are actively working on it. We just haven't identified anybody yet who said, yes, we're
Okay. And
we're
then
willing to take it that next step with you.
And then my second question is just regarding the general public, I guess in general, how it will impact people who are used to any sort of service. So if employees can, if they're not retaliated against, and like you used an extreme example with, home care, of course that's important, but the general service, people who are in front and the people who did show up for work are generally the receiving end of a lot of unhappy customers.
Yes.
When people call in or when they are short-staffed.
Right.
So I would expect that to escalate as well.
Oh, for sure.
And then how do you address that? I'm sorry, our law, I can't do anything, my hands are tied.
Yeah, I think some of it kind of comes back to just explaining in the moment, we're dealing with the consequences of this new earned sick time law. We had a number of people who called off today. That's just the reality of our, we hope that you'll give us grace and patience, as we navigate through this. But I think helping employees understand, look, I'm not just making these changes, if I separate out my 72 hours from everything else, I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because of this law, and this is forcing our hand on this. And, we had some employees who initially said, but we start new employees with 2 weeks, and it's we're probably going to separate, right? And you know, what does that message look like? And you have some employees are like, wait, I'm only gonna have 1 day of PTO then? And it's like, yeah. Like, but frankly, there is, I think, a bit of a strategy. And I've heard employment law attorneys say it, where it's like, okay, so you separate out the 72-hour, but then you kind of like do a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. Like if you say you need to take a mental health day and you're really going to Aruba, like,
Mental health.
yeah, it's mental health, right? Like, and I can't ask you for any documentation anyway that says other than like I have a need for this earned sick time. So there are ways, there's like stupid strategies where you'd be like, that's ridiculous that I would do that, and then just be like, use it like you use for a vacation. But that is a workaround that some employers are considering.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, but I think the customer angle of this and the disgruntled employees who are gonna be picking up the slack, if you do have, and again, it's an if question, not a when, but if you have an employee who kind of was like, oh, aha, like I figure out ways to just game this all the time, like beat traffic, you know, I want to sleep in for an extra 15 minutes, all these things, right? And I think like for other employees who may be grumbling about that, I mean, you just have to help them understand, like, I would love to do something about this, but my hands are tied by this new law, and unfortunately they haven't done you any favors with these changes. Yes.
We have a lot of temporary employees. Would we have to keep track of their paid time off, and does it go from one job to another?
Are you the temporary employer or are you employee?
Employer.
You're the employer, the temp employer. Yeah. So what I've heard on this, and I think there's still a lot of questions that you'll want to work through, and you probably will want to talk to an attorney about this, is contractually, I think you'll want to figure out between you and the hiring entity who bears responsibility for the ESTA, like, and it will ultimately come down to, but who is the employer? And as a temporary employer, it likely will be you. But you could try to settle that through contract and push it off on someone else, but I don't know how. It kind of feels like a good luck with that, sorry, situation. But yes, you have to track, even for your FLSA exempt, so for your overtime exempt employees, it's assumed that they're working a 40-hour week, but if they aren't working a 40-hour week and they're exempt and you don't ever track their time today, you will have to track their time. So every person that works for you, you are going to have to track their time. And so, like with the independent contractor thing, you might say, but I heard you say independent contractors, but I don't really control their hours. Nope, you don't, but like, you're gonna have to track their time. So it'll be similar for you, yeah.
So would that be the same for if someone comes from another job to here? How would we get their hours then for what they accrued for paid time off?
So,
It would
but
only-
wait,
it's
you're the
only for
temporary
one job.
employer, so you would only have responsibility for them as they are employed by you and they're moving from temp job to temp job to temp job.
Okay, so it's only within our business for the paid time off. They can't bring it to another job.
No, they can't bring it to another job. And in fact, it says only if they're transferred to a separate division or somewhere else within the company, or maybe the company gets acquired, then it does transfer. But it's like, as a temporary employer, so long as you are the employer, right, you are doing payroll before they shift, say they get hired on by the employer, it doesn't move then. It's just like when they're still part of your temp employee. Yes.
The contract employees.
Yeah.
So I have 2 part-time employees, plus I have some contracted employees. I don't keep track of their time, and their time varies
Shouldn't.
greatly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't give them paid time off.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how I would pay them because they're,
Yeah.
yeah.
You pay them like their normal hourly.
But it- see,
frankly,
that
the
varies-
definition of even how to determine pay is about as clear as mud. But
Right.
for that specific piece, we've heard different employment law attorneys say different things. So Leo is the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Okay, they initially put out an FAQ that said, kind of clarified who is an employee, who is not. And they said, oh, only those employees that you withhold for federal income tax purposes.
Which I don't.
Which is not right,
Yeah,
is not
for them.
you.
Uh-huh.
But then they have now rescinded that language because the act doesn't say that. They were making up like what the language in the act,
Because that
And-
makes sense.
It makes sense,
But
right?
it's not what the law says.
But there were a lot of employment attorneys who said, whoa, like, where do they come up with this definition? This is not supported by this act. And because of this private right of action, like, yeah, you could follow the Leo FAQ, but you could still get sued, and you could still, a court could determine that you bear responsibility for that. So they have since softened that language. But again, I think different employment law attorneys come to different conclusions. I know this is not super helpful about whether independent contractors are or are not covered under the act. This is a big one for us. I think everybody
Yeah.
says they shouldn't be because again, they're not employees, they're
Well, I
workers.
have kind of a unique situation. So I have a metaphysical store, so I have readers. And so they could have 6 readings in a day, or they could have 2 readings in a day, but they're there from,
But you
say
pay them.
3 to 7, but I pay them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would have to track their hours and they would have to accrue that 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, so long as there are no changes. Like you will have to ask them to submit that time and then you have to pay them their normal hourly rate. There's a
Yeah.
whole section about calculating the rate, but it's at a minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how this goes. It's like, oh, I didn't think I had any questions, and then somebody asked something. Yeah.
So doing like a little quick math,
Why it's not 69 point
so
whatever.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking, so they can actually do carryover and continue accruing in perpetuity. So
Yes.
hypothetical, my husband and I have a small brick and mortar retail space with 5 part-time employees.
Yep.
So if we have an employee who never calls in sick, so they're accruing 72 hours a year, and
A
in
part-time
5
wouldn't accrue 72, but yeah.
but let's say 50 hours.
Okay,
They're
yeah.
accruing 50 hours a week, and in 5 years they never call off, and now they quit. Do we then have to pay out?
Nope, you
The-
don't have to do
the
any
PTO?
payout. You may pay out unused time. But in fact, a lot of employers do pay out at the time of separation and or they pay out at the end of a calendar year. And the act specifies that all time must carry over. And then at the time of separation, if they return to you within 6 months, that time has to be reinstated. So essentially, it's basically saying to employers, don't pay out. Again, not employee friendly. A lot of employees like the payout, but the act says no, it has to carry over. Or no, at separation, you've got to keep it on your balance sheet for 6 months in case they boomerang back to you. So why would you pay it out only to have them come back to you within 6 months and have to basically double pay? So you do not have to pay out at any point, and in fact, there are incentives. There's disincentives to paying out.
But wouldn't, in her example, somebody could say, oh, I'm quitting, my last day is in 72 days, or 72 hours. Or whatever.
Right.
So then you're still
Paying
you're paying
250 hours of labor for
Yeah.
them not to be there.
out. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Oh,
could.
gotcha.
I mean, there's tons of ways to game this. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Yes.
Okay.
So what do you tell people who like may try to game the system, or what are you gonna?
Nothing.
Is there
You
gonna
can't.
be
You can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
You'll get
that
retaliated.
they'll just be able to do it?
I mean, because of that language that
The
says you
retaliation
shall
language.
take no disciplinary or retaliatory action against an employee for exercising their rights under this act. If I call in and I say I'm sick, I want to use my ESTA time, right? Like, end stop. Like, that is enough to have all of the protections under this act. So, I mean, therein rests the problem. It's just that make no mistake, like, no other state does it this way, right? Like, this stuff is outlier status in so many regards, and for good reason, right? That other states have said, like, no, that would be crazy to do it that way, but here we are. Okay, we had some more questions. Let's go here and then here.
This is for Justin. Is there
There
any
you go.
data? Is there any data out there that talks about what is the landscape in Michigan's going to look like if this goes into effect with the minimum wage and our tipped employees? We're a huge tourist state, so what does that look like for the economy here?
Some of our tourist leaders have been the most pronounced in having this conversation. Both in Grand Rapids and Detroit, we've talked about trying to develop a massive culture to bring people in, and you're now gonna shortcut the industry that's supposed to serve all the people coming in, right? And so that message actually gets through with some that aren't typical. Like, one of our Senator Winnie Brinks in Grand Rapids is very important to this process. She's the Senate Majority Leader. Grand Rapids just dramatically increased its hotel taxes as a way to make Grand Rapids a bigger destination. New soccer stadium, new amphitheater, trying to drive larger convention business to Grand Rapids at the same, and a great restaurant community. At the same time, you're going to completely undercut the workforce of that industry and make it a much less palatable, much less enjoyable experience. So that message is out there. The data is much more traumatizing when we just talk about the job loss, because the industry will, if you stay open, everyone is talking about changing their business model to be more like Panera.
Right.
Ordering at a
Self-serve.
counter. Or you are going to dramatically increase your prices. On average, it's 25% increase is what our members say was going to be necessary. So it will change the dynamic of the industry of what remains. After those restaurants close, obviously the industry will go on. It'll just look different with fewer employees.
I just went through a drive-through the other day, which fast food, and an AI bot took my order over the It was quite. They got it right, and I even removed something. Like they got it right. Okay, but I mean that's another example of like where this is going. It's like it's a one-time investment in the technology when you know you're going to have staffing issues, right? Like why deal with these staffing issues if there is a technology solution? And then we all talk about like just being scared about AI and other technology taking our jobs, right? Like so.
Yeah.
But the business has no choice but to figure out how are they going to stay operational.
And the technology is sophisticated enough now that actually is the realistic transition that is going to happen and much faster.
It was. I even asked the lady. I was like, "Was that AI who took my order?" She's like, "Oh yeah." We had a question over here. Yeah.
So if it's applying to salaried employees, so a lot of people in the auto industry work 60 plus hours a week, and then you staff up your plants with at least 25% more heads because people are calling off. Has anybody done a big picture, what's this gonna cost the economy to Michigan?
No, not at this point. I think we'll have some good case models after, if and when we get into this, right? But I think that's true. It's like at any industry at any point in time, we'll have to figure out like, if again, back to maybe the home health care model, right? Like if you know that you have to have people to treat patients, that is a non-negotiable, right? Like I can't just like say to 5 people like today you're not going to get your meds, right? Like what is the
Well, a lot of engineering is being shipped offshore.
Yeah.
It's going to Mexico or
Yeah.
other places.
right, but no, not at this point. Don't have that analysis. Yes.
So, is there a way to kind of mandate where, say an employee is calling off last minute? Who dictates as to whether or not they're gonna use their paid time off? Can we mandate a rule that says if you wanna use your ESTA pay, you have to let us know? Or we just automatically pay it?
So if they call in and say they're sick,
Yeah,
it's presumed that it would then go out of the ESTA bank.
okay. So
Or any of the qualifying reasons. It's not even that they're sick, it's that
Right.
their family member's sick, their
they can just say the
equivalent.
word sick.
Yes.
They're just taking their sick.
Yeah.
Because I can foresee a problem in the future where, I didn't mean to take that day, I really need it for this day because I am gonna go to Aruba. So, I can kind of see where this is, gonna be a problem,
Yeah.
where the employee thinks that they have all this time saved up, and then, we have to tell them no.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this will be solved, through your whatever system you use to manage PTO today. Like, if you're going to separate out the banks of time, right? You have one bank that says earn sick time, and another bank that says PTO. And like when the employee submits for that, or the supervisor submits, like there's going to have to be clarification. Are you taking PTO or are you taking sick time? And the minute you've elected sick time, like that's decision locked and loaded in the system. And that time has its own responsibilities and its own mandates around it. And then everything else here can be like, no, you needed to give us 2 weeks advance notice for, PTO, and then you didn't comply with you're gonna have like almost parallel policies on these things. For one's gonna dictate sick time, one's gonna dictate what you wanna do for everything else. But again, like most employers and businesses don't wanna create dueling because they know their employees like the one, but that's the reality, is forcing you to have to think about, okay, if I have flexibility on this, what do I want that to look like? I know it's gotta be this under earned sick time. There's really no flexibility. Let's see.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Business is booking based, and so sometimes you have to do pushes and cuts. If someone takes the cut, does that mean we still pay them for their time?
No, only for hours worked. 1 hour for every 30 hours worked.
Yes, but I'm talking about if they get cut, will they then get their SFA?
No, because they're not actually working.
Okay.
You have a question?
I just had a quick
Yeah.
one. You said there's lots of different legislation that is hoping to be changed. Is there one resource where we can like sign up to a mailing list to see these changes? Or like, how will we see that the changes happen before February 21st?
Yeah, so your chamber, whatever chamber you're engaged in, will be sending out like their weekly, I don't know how often the newsletters and that sort of thing are, but like emails to alert you, like we're keeping our members apprised like on a weekly basis about what is the status of this, and more often than that if there's something noteworthy.
Mary,
So-
we put in ours too, right, in our partner newsletter, so if you get ours, Sean, too,
Okay.
we'll make sure that's included in the Explore Brighton Hollow newsletter as well.
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way, or to go to like our website or the restaurant and lodging website, like where we would have, information on our websites about the status of this, but
And
yeah,
how
it's
late
really.
how late could it change? Could it change like the day before, the week before?
No, well, okay, so there's kind of like two different time frames here realistically. So, we talked about how there's 8 session days now between now and the end of the year. In order for this bill, these two bills, House Bill 6056 and 6057, which are the two main only bills really, to pass, that bill has to make, those two bills have to make it out of the House, not this week, but next week, by Thursday of next week. This is like the 11th or the 12th? 11th or 12th?
It was the
12.
second, third, for 12.
11, okay, 12. If that bill does not make it out of the House, because there's this rule that a bill between chambers has to lay over 5 days, 5 calendar days, it can't be acted on by the next chamber for those 5 days. And if that following week is gonna be their last week of legislative session, it has to get out next week, out of the House.
And if it
If
doesn't.
they go to the 23rd, yeah.
Start from scratch.
Right.
So
So
new
that, okay,
legislature
so,
in January.
yeah, so at the end of this year, this is the end of the legislative session, right? So all bills in the process today, every bill that's got a bill number assigned to it, they all die, they go away, poof, gone, right? So then the new legislature gets seated in January, it takes them several weeks to get up and going and running. And then they could still pass a bill in the next legislative session. Now you have a situation where Republicans control the House, Democrats control the Senate, our governor's still a Democrat, so you have this bipartisan makeup. Right now it's all Dem, all levels. So you could have a situation where a bill could pass like right up to that February 21 or even past it.
So if it doesn't pass, February 21 comes and goes without any
Goes into
consequence? Or it goes into effect as is?
Goes
We're
into
looking
effect
Goes
to
into
amend
effect.
it. Okay.
As
Ruling.
is.
As in the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Yes.
So something's coming down the pike on February 22nd.
Something is coming February
Yes.
22nd, 21st. It becomes a question of what.
What does it look like?
What does it look like? So what we're saying to people is, and I think you're probably saying the same thing, like plan for the worst case scenario, which is no changes, right? But like I wouldn't implement it before you have to. Like don't communicate with employees, this is what we're doing, oh my gosh, and it's all so bad for you, because then you're gonna have a bunch of disgruntled employees and then you're gonna be like, oh, never mind, just kidding, we're really gonna do it this way. Because it's probably going to be a third way, right? It's not going to be status quo. It's not going to be February 21. It's going to be some other alternative version of, right? So we understand that is a little unsettling, but it is better than what
Very,
it
very
is.
hard to get something done before February 21st.
It is.
If we
Not
do that.
impossible,
Which is
though.
why we're saying 8 days means so much.
Yes.
It's not impossible, but it's very, very challenging to get a new legislature up and running.
I'm the optimist of the two people, but,
God bless you. Someone needs to be.
Yes.
Okay, so, there may be other people, like you kind of prompted me to ask this. I have part-time employees, they kind of own their own schedule, I own a fitness studio. They are my employees, they kind of build their own schedule, I'm gonna work this day, I'm gonna work that day. And, we give them the time off, but if they take a day off that they may have normally been scheduled, would you recommend now that ask for a reason? Is this are you going to the doctor? Are you going to a child? I mean, do I need to get a reason, or am I
No,
just
you actually
assuming-
can't ask for a reason, but you could, what you wanna do is set up a system where you have the 72, like, so I assume you don't give them
They
paid
get no
time
time
off.
off right
Yes.
now.
So you're just gonna wanna set up the 72 hours or up to 72 hours of earned sick time.
Yeah.
They'll earn it as they accrue it, I assume, because I
Right.
assume they're not, you wouldn't wanna front load.
They work like 15
You don't
hours
wanna
a week.
incentivize maybe them to take
Right.
it.
But then if they change their schedule, so I could look at the schedule and suddenly, Sally's supposed to work Wednesday and she blocked it off because she's not working Wednesday. So now do I need to go
She's
in
not
there?
scheduled to work, though.
She's scheduled to work.
Oh, she is scheduled.
She's scheduled to work. She works every Wednesday, but she just blocked it off,
Because she makes her own schedule.
Because she makes her own schedule.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I should be writing my policies.
I mean, so you would just have to be in a situation where she's electing to use her ESTA time. And if she's not electing to use that ESTA time, you don't bear responsibility for that. But if she's electing
So
to.
I just have to.
You just have to make sure you have a policy in place that says you're earning as you accrue. If you need to do this, you need to notify us, right? Like foreseeable, not foreseeable, right? And then, like, if she decides that on a given Wednesday, that's the day she is normally scheduled to work, and she's gonna go to the doctor's office for 8 hours or whatever, right? That she's eligible to use those 72 hours, and you have to pay her.
Okay.
Or, whatever portion of the 72 hours. If she wants to use 2 minutes to go to the doctor's office, she can. Or, whatever you track time for. I assume you track time in hours, but, so you're probably lucky there. All right, anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, I think that we got them all.
Yep.
Thank you very much for hosting this, but also for being here. And I know that lobbyists and legislators, we all get really kind of a bad rap. But I wanted to tell you how important the lobbyists are to me as a legislator. They know this stuff. They know the industry. You're members of the chamber or the alliance because you find some benefit in it, and then in the chamber. It is extremely important because we can't learn all this stuff, and that's why we need people. I'm not promising my vote to anybody because they come into my office, but they do allow us to ask the questions. They are a great resource. I hope that you will use them. The chambers use them. Use your local chamber. This is a critical situation for the state of Michigan. We are going to lose a lot of jobs, a lot of businesses, a lot of people that want to go into business will not go into business anymore. Michigan we might as well just turn off the lights. 20% of our restaurants are anticipating that they're gonna close. Another 25% are gonna have to raise their prices. These small business owners, my husband's an electrical contractor, it's him and my son. I can't believe, I'm like, it's a good thing we have an accountant because there's no way I could rely on my husband to implement all these changes. And I don't have the time to do it. But it is extremely important. You don't like the politics side of it. I honestly don't either. But the timing is critical. You can't wait till January when we start a new legislative session when you have to set your business up in February for this. Right. It's critical now, and I encourage you, yes, slam my office, slam the phone calls, but every other legislator in our area and the governor's office needs to be reminded how critical this is. You need an answer. I personally don't think it should be my job to interfere with your business relationship, the employer and employees, but this is the law. This is what's in place. We have a Supreme Court ruling on this, and so we're bound to it right now. So it is extremely, extremely important. Please use those links. We are going into session. It is continuing to evolve. We are trying to work across the aisle. I heard it on the campaign trail. I heard it from I'm a Republican, and the Democrats said, yep, we want to fix it. We're waiting till after the election. The election is over. It's been over for 3 weeks. It's time to get to work and get a solution for everybody. This is maybe not the most perfect solution, but I do think it is the best solution for our time. So please reach out to Senator Tice, myself, Representative Bazat, Representative Conlin, Representative Mueller, and also incoming Representative Jason Wolford, so everybody knows just how critical this is. Spread it to your family. It does really help when we hear what you need. So.
Thank you. Well said.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Justin, I can't thank you guys enough for being here today to present to our members. This has been, yep, and Mary's got some gifts for you for coming down this way, so thank you again. We do really appreciate it. They are the dynamic duo, aren't they? I also love the lightheartedness that you bring to it, Wendy, because if we weren't laughing, we'd be crying. So thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you to the Alliance for your partnership. Thank you to Explore Brighton Howell area for your partnership, and thank you to Crystal Gardens for having us. We will all keep you updated as things are developing rapidly, hopefully with some great changes coming your way very soon. And have a great rest of your week. We'll be in touch. Thank you.